All right, welcome to the third and final video. Hi, Henry. This is Henry, our cat, Henry Stray Cat. Okay, say goodbye. Okay, well, it's kind of rude. Third video, last video. This is our third lesson of our boot camp for AP Lang. I hope you're having a good day. Hopefully, you're not watching all of these at once. Give yourself a break. Hopefully, you're coming back to them. Again, thank you for taking the time to watch these, to look into these lessons and these materials. Sharing my screen. All right. This boot camp is going to serve a few purposes. If you were in person, this would kind of serve as a catch-all safety net of sorts, in that some of the materials maybe we didn't get all the way through, or maybe students had more questions over the first 2 days. We would come back to those on this third day. And then we're going to come back to that graphic novel. So that's what we'll start with. And then we have our last batch of terms to know. And these, I think, are the easier terms out of all of them, because these are terms that I know you have heard, that you've been taught these terms since elementary school, middle school, and high school. These are literary terms that are used in rhetorical ways. And then we'll kind of briefly talk about what the test will look like. We do have a test that first week of school. Not to scare you or stress you out. It's going to be over these topics, but we'll preview kind of what the format of that test will be and what you can expect there. But all right, let's go ahead and start this. Let's see. Which do you enjoy more, reading or writing? I would say probably writing. I'm still in school right now. I'm pursuing a doctorate. There's a lot of academic reading that goes along with that, reading a lot of articles and peer-reviewed stuff. Yes, I know, Henry. Thank you for supporting me. And then just with education in general, there's typically a lot of more academic type reading. So I don't get to read for fun as much as I'd like to. And I do write a lot. I love to write songs. I love to write, short stories, I guess you could call them. But I'd say writing. Okay, but something to think about. Which do you enjoy more, reading or writing? It is important to note that this is AP Lang and composition, so this is focused not so much on literature and analyzing literature, but it's more about language overall and working on enhancing writing and critical reading skills. All right, analysis and synthesis. Synthesis. I have a tough time with that word. So strategic reading, investigating texts and analyzing meaning, putting the pieces together with synthesis. Remember, analysis from our first video, taking the bike apart. Synthesis is pulling what you've learned from that analysis and using it in something else, more complex, putting something together that's new or different. Using reading strategies, imagining ideal readers. Okay, so to start off, this is another PDF. It's a chapter from this graphic novel. If you would read the chapter titled Strategic Reading, it's a standalone PDF, so you don't need to look for the chapter, but it is called Strategic Reading, and that is on Classroom under day 3. Go ahead, and when you have time, if you could read that. Once, as you're reading, there's another just kind of short Google Doc with some questions. If you would fill that out either as you're reading or once you're done, and then submit that on Google Classroom when you are finished. Okay, going to move on to terms part 3, 10 terms for style and analysis. This is more for interpreting, being able to recognize these terms in your whatever text you're reading, but it's also to help you with your writing. So when you're writing a response, you can break these terms down, you can address them, you can explain why they are used and how they're used. For those who did not know, this is the mom from Sopranos. Quite the face. All right, diction, number 1. We talked about diction that first video and how it can really enhance your rhetorical writing. So diction, the definition, what you want to know for the test is be able to define what is diction, what are these terms. Diction, the definition is the word choice used by the writer. Consider the connotations and denotations of words. So diction is the word choice used. The context determines word choice, right? Words have your denotation, that's the definition. You have the connotation, which means some words might mean different things depending on how they're used. The word honey, for example, is a literal product made by bees. Also can be a term of endearment. The context determines when I can use that word, right? I can call my wife honey, but if I were to call anyone else honey, she may not appreciate that. But I could also use honey in talking about the actual product of honey. I had some honey butter just earlier today. Examples, we have some sentences here. We have an original sentence. We have diction A, diction B, and diction C. We have formal, informal, concise, and they all say the same thing. Each sentence says the same exact thing, but they all have different vibes to them. So the original sentence is the man walked into the room. Simple, to the point. Sometimes that's very effective. The formal academic way, the gentleman perambulated into the chamber. Perambulated. Not gonna lie, I had to look up what that word meant. The gentleman perambulated into the chamber. It's a more formal way to say that. Slang, the dude sauntered into the joint. Now, sauntered, I don't know if that's really slang. The dude strolled into the joint. That's probably more informal, but sauntered, also a synonym. Diction C, concise and direct. The individual entered the space. It's like a robot. All of those have different tones. They have different moods to them. They give you different impressions, and they can be interpreted in a different way, and that's the power of diction. Okay, syntax, that's taking all those words, putting them into sentences. It's the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in language. So whenever we are referring to grammar, punctuation, usage, we're talking about syntax, how we're constructing our sentences. And that's an important term to know because that's what we'll be doing throughout the years. We'll be doing a lot of writing, a lot of timed writes, short writes, long-form writing, and that's understanding how syntax works is very important. Is it more effective to put the clause here, or is it more effective to put the clause here? Is it more effective to start the sentence with a fragment, a conjunction? Is it more effective to use a semicolon, an em dash? We're talking about syntax. Examples, we have simple. The dog barked. The mailman ran. The street was empty. Again, that could be effective depending on the context. Complex. As the lone mangy dog, whose barks echoed eerily through the otherwise silent tree-lined street, continued its persistent yelps, the startled mailman, clutching his bag tightly, hastily retreated, leaving behind the profound stillness that had characterized the early morning. Okay, two different feelings, right? And those, it's the same scenario, but how the syntax is used, the diction that's used, very different. Then we have different styles of syntax. Inverted. Never before have I seen such beauty. Instead of I have never seen such beauty before, the inversion emphasizes never before and creates a more formal and dramatic effect. Now, what you need to know for the test is the definition. You're not going to be asked to label simple or complex or give an example of an inverted syntax. Those are just examples for you to understand what syntax is and how arranging a sentence can change its meaning. That's the important thing to take away from this. So again, those who are watching, definition is what's important for this term for now. Eventually, as we do that spiral and we come back to these terms, yes, I'd like you to be able to write a simple syntax sentence, a simple or a complex one. I'd like you to try writing inverted sentences. But that's down the road. All right, tone. Again, a term that you have learned since elementary. Tone and mood, they go together. Two peas in a pod. So the tone T, you have a T in tone. That's one way that I would remember this. And you also have a T in a writer. So tone is the writer's or speaker's attitude toward the subject, audience, or themselves. It's revealed through diction, syntax, and imagery, figures of speech. Tone is what the writer intended for you to feel, or the writer's attitude, how the writer felt in writing that piece. So tone is the writer's perspective, the writer's feeling. Tone, T, writer, T. Why is it important? Well, it is going to help you, especially in analyzing and in synthesizing, also for the AP exam. recognizing tone and being able to understand tone and explain tone is a benefit for the FRQs on the exam. Analyzing tone is paramount because it reveals the author's purpose and perspective. At least you can give a guess as to what that is. Understanding tone allows students to discern whether an author is serious, sarcastic, humorous, critical, sympathetic, objective, or if the author bounces around between those different types of feelings. Again, very important. We have two examples here, two different tones that the writer intended. Now I'll let you read those. You can pause the video. Mood, second to tone, or next to tone, very similar. It's the feeling or ambiance created for the reader by the text. So mood ends in a D, reader has a D. The mood is how the reader feels from reading a text. So a couple of things, tone and mood, very, very similar. They deal with feelings. One is what the writer intended, and one is how the reader receives it. Sometimes they can be the same. Sometimes you can have something that the writer intended for it to be this way and the readers experienced it this way, and so they're the same. Sometimes they can be different. One example of how mood and tone sometimes are different is you can look at songs, for example. One song, the writer, the author of that song, maybe wrote that with a different tone in mind, but you, the listener of that song, because of your past experiences, applied it differently and interpreted it differently and experienced it differently. So sometimes mood and tone can be different. Sometimes they can be the same. They're about feeling, though. Understanding mood helps you appreciate the emotional impact of a text. Authors manipulate the mood to draw the reader in, influence their perceptions, and reinforce those thematic concerns. Another example, here's a passage, strong adjectives, strong imagery, and the mood there also. Again, you can pause the video and read if you would like. All right, metaphor, I'd say the Michael Jordan of literary devices, metaphor. Extended metaphor, that's a metaphor on steroids, but also similar ballpark as metaphor. It's a figure of speech that directly compares two unlike things without using like or as. If it uses like or as, that's a simile. It states that one thing is another, creating a deeper, more imaginative understanding of the subject. You are my sunshine, is what I would say to Henry as he ignores me back there. Not literally my sunshine. Obviously, that would be extremely dangerous and lethal if that were true. Simply saying that Henry brightens up my day, warms my heart. Metaphors use images to try to deliver a message. Identifying and explaining metaphors helps in analyzing an author's ability to create vivid imagery, evoke emotion, develop thematic richness throughout a piece. An example, one of the more famous examples of a metaphor from William Shakespeare's play As You Like It. This is an excerpt. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. And one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. He goes into each age, what each stage of life is. Obviously, not literally a stage, using the image of a stage to represent life and how we play parts and how we act. It's a strong way to deliver a message. We know what the message of this piece is, the stages of life that we go through from infancy all the way to elderly. But it makes it in some ways more memorable and significant and powerful because it uses that metaphor in a relatable way. All right, personification, another classic. I don't know what sports, let's stick with NBA. I'd say personification, Steph Curry. Yeah, I think so. Giving human qualities or characteristics to inanimate objects or abstract ideas. So on the test, yes, it will help you to know the definition of these. And these terms you should know the definitions of. But also being able to identify them in a piece, and I'll show you an example of that in a second, and explain how it's used, right? So you see personification used in a passage, you need to be able to explain that it's used and what effect it has. Students should analyze how personification enhances imagery, creates specific moods, or subtly conveys an author's attitude or tone. Example, this is from Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. Over increasingly large areas of the United States, spring now comes unheralded by the return of the birds. The early mornings are strangely silent, where Once they were filled with the beauty of birdsong. The roadsides, once so attractive, were now lined with brown and withered vegetation as though swept by fire. These were places with no witchcraft, no enemy action had silenced the rebirth of new life in this stricken world. The people had done it themselves. A couple of spots there that where things are personified, things that are not human are given human characteristics. You might be given a passage like this and asked, how is personification used in this passage? Example, spring now comes unheralded. Well, spring can't be unheralded or heralded. Spring is not a living thing. But to personify it, give it the act of being unheralded. Make spring into this new image. The early mornings are strangely silent. The act of being silent is a human quality more so. Early mornings can't be vocal or silent, technically. There are a couple of other examples in this passage. Identifying personification, how it's used, why it's used. All right, we're coming to the end. Hyperbole, not hyperbole. Hyperbole. I always want to say hyperbole, but hyperbole. Exaggeration for emphasis or effect. This is used in a number of texts, number of ways. We use it in our everyday conversations quite often. Analyzing hyperbole helps understanding how authors create a rhetorical impact, whether it's to highlight absurdity and demonstrate strong feelings or satirize a situation. It's important to distinguish it from literal statements to grasp the author's true intention. So Patrick Henry, speech to the Virginia Convention, 1775. So this is an example of a passage you might have on the test. Find hyperbole in this example. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with the so formidable an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed, and when a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Couple of small cases of hyperbole there. Will it be when we are totally disarmed? That absolute totally? Well, they wouldn't have disarmed every single person. They wouldn't have been totally disarmed. No, that wouldn't have happened. Somebody would have been armed. So the totally, that absolute, that's a hyperbole. When a British guard shall be stationed in every house. Well, a British guard wouldn't be in every house. In a lot of houses they wouldn't be able to get to, or they wouldn't want to stay in probably. So that's hyperbole. We also have an allusion there at the end, suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss, an allusion to Judas and Jesus. All right, suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss, a bit hyperbolic at the end there. Allusion, we just talked about an allusion. There was one there, the reference to Judas kissing Jesus on the cheek, an indirect or passing reference to an event, person, place, or artistic work, specifically that the author expects you to know, is an allusion, very effective. Very common. Recognizing allusions is vital for fully grasping an author's intended message. If you don't know the story of the Trojan horse, you're not going to get the allusion. You're not going to get the point of him bringing it up. If you aren't fully aware of the story of Judas betraying Jesus with a kiss, you may not, that last sentence may not make any sense to you, right? So when we use allusions, we try to use allusions that everyone's going to know or should know. An example, the new policy was a Trojan horse, appearing beneficial but designed to cause harm from within. So that obviously alludes to the story of the Trojan horse, which is a bizarre story. I mean, if you really just did a little quick rant here, what were they going to do with that horse? What were they going to do with it? I mean, this is a giant wooden horse. What are they going to, they're just going to put it in the corner? What are they going to do with the horse? Why would they just no, we don't want this. It's the worst gift ever to give somebody, is a giant wooden horse. And you don't think maybe that's a little strange? Hey, this army was here, and now that they're gone, and there's a giant horse. Terrible gift. All right, two more terms, analogy. So in our world of comparison, we've got metaphor, simile, and analogy. All very similar, all types of comparisons in a way. Simile often is the easiest, and it's not included on this list because of that, because it uses like or as. It's very direct, very out in the open. Metaphors can be a little bit more interpretive. You may have to dig a little bit to pull out the meaning of a metaphor. An example there, time is a thief. A little bit deeper, opposed to he is as hungry as a horse. That's very simple to understand. Similes are easier to interpret, I believe. Metaphors are a little bit more complex. Analogies, just a different type of comparison. It's a type of argument, more complicated, a little more lengthy at times. So an analogy, the definition that I would like you to know is a comparison between two or more things. Excuse me. These videos, I'm starting to lose my voice, and I'm talking too much. Definition. An analogy is a comparison between two different things, typically for the purpose of explanation or clarification. So unlike a metaphor, which often creates an equivalence and a powerful image, an analogy aims to explain something unfamiliar by likening it to something familiar, often in a more extended or detailed way. An example, very simple, just as a pilot uses a checklist before flying, a surgeon follows a precise procedure. So there's no poetic imagery there, like a metaphor has, right? Time is a thief. I mean, it's very poetic. This is very simple, I would argue, to interpret. Just as a pilot uses a checklist before flying, a surgeon follows a precise procedure. So that's an analogy. It's a more direct comparison using this very similar, equal thing to describe this thing that's equal to it. Analogy is our second to last term. Our last term, irony, another term that I'm sure you're familiar with. A literary device that involves a contrast or discrepancy between what is stated and what is really meant, or between what is expected to happen and what actually happens. We have three types of irony. Again, these should be familiar to you. You should have heard of these: verbal, situational, and dramatic. Those are our three main types of irony that it's helpful to know and be able to recognize. Verbal irony: after failing a test, a student exclaims, "Oh, fantastic. This is exactly what I needed today." Well, it's not exactly what she or he needed today. They're being ironic. They're being verbally ironic. Situational irony. This is kind of the more fun one. You hear a lot. A fire station burns down. Well, that's situationally ironic. You would think a fire station would be the safest place from a fire. And then dramatic irony. In a horror movie, the audience knows the killer is hiding in the closet, but the character innocently walks into the room saying, "I'm sure no one's here." Audience knows something that the characters, the people within the text or in the story, do not know. Dramatic irony. All right. That is it. Last video. I know it might seem like a lot, but it is very doable. Again, I think a lot of these terms specifically on this day 3, you should be familiar with. I mean, I know you've heard diction. You've probably heard syntax. I know you've tone, mood, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, allusion, analogy, irony. All of those are going to be, I think, just refreshers for you. So not that I still think you should study and look into them, but these aren't completely new terms by any means. All right, what to know for the test. The test will be broken up, I think, into 2 days because there's going to be a multiple choice section, fill in the blank labeling, and then there's going to be a writing section, which is a free response. So the first part will be that Friday, and then I'm thinking that Monday when we come back will be the second part. And I need to nail that down for sure, but we'll have Wednesday, when we come back to school, we'll have Wednesday kind of get into our seats and introduce everything and kind of talk about AP, laying overall, the exam a little bit. On Thursday, we'll start to do some prep and preparing for the test and going over some of these terms and whatnot and practicing. And then on Friday, we'll have the first section of our test. So for the test, read scenarios. What you need to do, what you need to be able to do on the test is read scenarios and identify the ATP, audience, topic, purpose. Label the rhetorical triangle graph. Identify certain rhetorical appeals and define rhetorical terms. And I believe there are 27 of them, not 28. So I took deduction off in the last video. The test format will be fill in the blank and labeling. So that's going to be kind of with that rhetorical triangle. You'll be filling in the blank. You'll be labeling certain things. On the actual AP exam, it's broken up into two sections. It's broken up into what are called MCQs and FRQs. So MCQs, multiple choice questions, FRQs, free response questions, and that's writing. So we'll have multiple choice, and we'll have one free response question with an article that you will not know. You'll have to read it in that moment, and then write a free response to that question. This test will be graded, and this is very important. It's going to be graded more as a formative assessment rather than a summative assessment. We'll have our categories of formative, summative, and finals within the gradebook. Obviously, summative will have a little more weight to them, summative assessments. Formative will have formative assignments every single week, multiple throughout the week. So the reason why I feel like that is important is if you do not do well on this first test, you will have chances pretty quickly to make up for that and to remedy that situation. So the test will be graded as a formative assessment, so it'll not have the same weight as the summative. Purpose of this test is to check for understanding on where you're coming in with these terms of these foundational concepts. So again, these aren't just gotcha questions, or these aren't terms that are irrelevant or that we'll talk about now and then not hit on again. These are terms that we will come back to throughout the entire year. So if we can start the year with a good understanding of what some of these are right off the bat, that will make the discussions and conversations, assignments, everything much easier as we get going. That is the point. If you have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing with any of these videos, terms, the test, or anything like that. Please let me know. If you'd like to meet at a different time, let me know. I'm completely open to that. Before school, after school, feel free to email me with any questions. All of these materials we posted on Classroom. Let me know if you have issues accessing them. And I look forward to starting the school year, seeing you on Wednesday the 13th. So, all right. Have a good night. Henry, you want to say anything? Henry? Okay. Oh, well, kind of rude. But have a good night. See ya. Bye. Wait. Hold on. I don't want to do that yet. Stop.